Hello, this is Kaii Marie, and you are listening to episode 5, season 1 of the Healing Element podcast. If you are watching this episode on the Healing Element podcast YouTube channel, please be sure to like, share, and subscribe. If you are listening by audio, please be sure to download today's episode and subscribe. Today, we are continuing our series of Dr. Joy Degruy's theory, post-traumatic slave syndrome. Today, we're talking more about solutions. Please stay tuned. Hello and welcome to the Healing Element Podcast, a weekly discussion giving you the tools to understand and heal from intergenerational trauma. I am your host, Kaii Marie. To find out more information about the topics discussed today, visit kaimarie.com. Hello, guys. This is Kaii Marie, and welcome to the Healing Element Podcast. So honored that you decided to join me today. We are continuing our conversation regarding Dr. Joy Degruy's theory, post-traumatic slave syndrome. This will be a quick episode along with the episode to follow this one. We're just talking about the solutions, but many of the solutions that Dr. Joy Degruy discusses later in the book we have touched upon through our conversations over the past few weeks. So I really am excited to jumping into sharing with you some new episodes in which I will have some guests talking about historical trauma, childhood trauma, and so on and so forth. And for those that have been joining me thus far, I appreciate your time. So also, if you've been joining me, you'll know that I've been sharing my screen with you to share with you my PowerPoint. So we're going to do that now. And if you are listening to this podcast, don't you worry. You will be able to view the PowerPoint on the Healing Element Podcast YouTube channel. Okay, so today we're going to be talking about some solutions. And like I said, some of this overlaps with what we have discussed for the past few weeks. And I just want you guys to think about it a little bit more and really see how we can start making incremental changes in our daily lives to then affect our families, our communities, and then society. But first, all change starts with us. And I remember before when I first entered the space of healing, and I was very early on. I don't even know if I can say early on in my healing journey. Want to make sure my mic is on. I have a habit of talking without my mic on, which then I have to do everything all over again. But it's on. Awesome. But I remember coming into this space of healing. And as I said, I don't want to really say early on in my healing journey because, like, how do I gauge this? I know I'm for sure not where I started. But I was just kind of like entering the space like, oh, I want to change lives. I want to have an impact. And that was like my thing that I wanted to do. And then I began to realize, change does not happen through you trying to change other people. Change happens with you. You need to just keep working on you and stop trying to change other people. And once I got that, I was like, you know what? I got enough on my plate with me. Like I don't have it to try to change or convince somebody else. I'm just going to focus on doing my work. Now, that doesn't mean I'm not kind of looking at other people and something that they may be going through. Definitely being there as a support system, but trying to change someone else or trying to, like, listen, you got to do this. You got to start doing that. Nope. I just have to keep focusing on what I have in front of me because I have so much work that I need to do on myself that I don't have the energy to try to convince someone else that they need to start doing the work. So hopefully through my life, through my ups and downs, through my struggles, through my successes, that someone can say, wow, I think I want to go on this healing path because if she's made it thus far and if she's doing it, then I can do it too. So that's my goal, is to inspire people, to motivate people, to tell the hard truth to people, because I have to continuously tell myself the hard truth, and sometimes it's not easy. It's really hard always being accountable for yourself, and it's not an easy task. And so I say that with love, I say that with compassion, but when you are on this journey, that's what a lot of it is. It's being holding yourself responsible for your actions. And I'm not saying I'm always perfect. I will always be a work in progress. But my goal is to have a pattern in my life in which I continuously hold myself responsible, continuously be responsible for my own healing. And of course, that goes with saying being responsible for my own actions, what I say, what I think, all that stuff. So, what we're talking about today is a few of the solutions that Dr. Joy Degruy outlines in her book, Post Traumatic Slave Syndrome, which I hope by now you guys have ordered it. And that you are kind of diving deep. If you're not sure if you want to order the book yet, please go to YouTube and you can find several lectures by Dr. Joy Degruy. That's how I first became really introduced to her, is through listening to her lectures. After doing that, then I decided to pick up the book. All right, so let's jump into it. Like I said, this will be a short episode because a lot of this we've kind of started to talk through over the past few weeks. But there are things that are extremely important that are, of course, in the book for solutions, and I wanted to make sure that we touched upon it. First is solution, being a model for our children. So what is this solution part about again? Again, first part of the symptom, or the first symptom that Dr. Joy Degruy tells us that says, hey, we could be dealing with some post-traumatic slave syndrome. It's vacant self-esteem. So that's when you just think really low of yourself and who and what you are. And we talked about when you have that vacant self-esteem, something has to fill that void. So if you live in a society, this racist society, and they're constantly pumping, so society is constantly pumping out this image of what you should be, what you should thrive to be, then basically what's going to happen is you are then going to gravitate towards that because there's nothing there within you to say, no, I'm going to reject this because I don't believe that's me, right? So if that doesn't happen, then you're going to then really absorb and internalize those type of ideologies that are being pushed out in front of you to say, yeah, this is what you should do. This is exactly, if you're African American and you are a man or a boy, you need to grab a ball, you need to sing, you need to rap, you need to dance. You need to be in a space where you are entertaining people, right? If you are a Black woman, you need to have this, I am Black woman, hear me roar. I don't need a man. I'm going to do it all by myself. I am super. So there's these narratives that are constantly being pushed out. So what we have to do is we have to decide, is this for the benefit of me? Is this for the benefit of my group? And you only can do that when you're having an honest look at the society in which you live. Okay, so we went through all of the different symptoms that Dr. Joy Degruy provides. And so that leads us now to the solution. So if you want to know more about the symptoms, guess what you're going to have to do? You're going to have to go back and take a look at earlier episodes. So now, as we kind of went through all of that, we're now in our continuing with the solution. So being a model for our children. How do we show up in the world? How do we show up for our children? How do we begin to get healthy so that we can show up in a positive way to our kids, right? And it's so important that we begin to start to some self-reflection, no longer just kind of going on and saying, well, that's just the way I am, which is something that I used to do. This is just who I am. This is me, accept me as I am. Nope, we can all use some help, right? We can all change for the better. So begin to look at yourself. Are there patterns in your life that you are looking to change? And that these patterns will help you cultivate healthier relationships. What I have learned on my journey is that it wasn't always the other person. Wah, wah. Sometimes it was me, right? It wasn't always, well, that person talked to me that way. Sometimes it's because of my own insecurities and my own issues that I didn't deal with. That caused me to view the other person in a certain light and also respond and react in a certain light. So we have to be honest with ourselves. Sometimes it's us, right? So when we say sometimes it's not us, it's not for us to just kind of stay there and say, well, I said that's just me. No, okay, now that I know it's me, what do I need to do to make healthier decisions? Because whatever we do in our life, that's going to reverberate in our families, in our communities, and in society. And so if we're doing the work to create a healthy environment, because we want our children to grow up in a much better environment and society than what we currently live in, then that means we have to do our own internal work. So that means we have to be a model for our children. Doesn't mean that we're perfect. It just means that we're doing the work and we can be honest with our children. Again, I say this disclaimer, I'm not a parent. Okay, so you may say, well, you don't have a space to talk about it. But I do have young cousins and family members and friends who have children who are coming up in the society. And even though I don't have children, I would love for their babies to grow up in a much better society than what we're currently in. So if I'm not doing this for my own children, but I'm doing it for other people and their children, how much more should you be wanting to do the work if you have babies? That those children, that's your investment, right? So you have these children. Now it's time to make sure that you're creating and cultivating a space for them of healing, of love, of encouragement. That's so important to their growth. So in order to do that, we have to do the work on self and we have to be a model for our children, which means that we have to be held responsible for our actions and for our own healing. Next, Dr. Joy Degruy talks about is telling our story. This is something that we touched upon in the last episode when we talked about racist socialization and racial socialization. Being honest with the society in which we live. We as African Americans were, for the most part, I think we may be getting a little bit better. We're not being honest about the society in which we live. You know, we see celebrities, and I have my thoughts about celebrities. Can I be honest with you guys? Can I be honest? It pains me when I see these celebrities given a platform to talk about political issues in which they have no background, no knowledge. They don't really care. They're just doing this because the powers that be are like, you got to come in and quiet these Black folks down. So they just start shoving celebrities in front of you or in front of us, trying to see which celebrity can have the most impact to kind of quiet down the Black folk. To me, that is extremely insulting. You know, I don't see that happening to another group. When this whole COVID thing started and we saw how it was impacting our communities and how it's continuing to devastate our communities, I'm seeing the P. Diddy's of the world come out, all these singers, and they're hosting summits. And I'm just standing there and I'm just like, what other group would tolerate this? Telling us to save ourselves when we pay taxes into this society, when we have invested into the society, when we have our labor built this country, and now we have to save ourselves because why? And the funny thing about it is, it's like, save yourself, but you got to vote. Your vote matters. But you're telling me that the government's not going to come in and do anything. I have to save myself. So I'm voting for what? To do what? Because my ancestors did it? Let me tell you something. Our ancestors did not just vote to vote. They voted because they believed that vote would improve their condition. If you are voting just because your ancestors voting, that's wrong. You should be voting because your vote is attached to a candidate who you believe, once I cast this vote for you, you're going to do something for the community in which I live. Not I'm voting for you because great great grandma so and so or great great grandpa so and so fought and maybe even died for me to vote. If they knew you were voting for something and getting nothing in return, I think they would want to have a conversation with you and say, what are you doing? We voted and we did everything we did to give you a voice to get what you needed for your community and for your family. So we need to tell our story, being honest, no longer allowing these celebrities to kind of paint the narrative of what Black life is. We need to tell our stories to our children so they get a dose of reality of what it really is. All right, I'm gonna try to move along. I get really worked up but I see these entertainers and I'm just like, so where were you when we were having conversations about the racial wealth gap? Where are you when we're talking about the trauma? And I know that there's some celebrities that have entered this space of trauma and bringing it to light, which I greatly appreciate. But we do have doctors, we do have therapists, we have people in this space who have done the work. I will be interviewing many of them, people that have had the education experience of working with people that have suffered from trauma. That's who we need in the forefront of these type of conversations. People that understand historical trauma, people that are going to speak about historical trauma. But if we as a community are not telling our stories to each other, then these celebrities can run around and say whatever they want to say. Because at the end of the day, guess what, guys? At the end of the day, these celebrities, do they care? I don't know. But I do know that somehow they benefit because they're a brand, right? They are a walking brand. We think we know them because we connect with them on Instagram or YouTube or Facebook. We don't know who they are. Everything that they do is for their brand, it's marketing because they are a walking business. So we have to be honest about what is placed in front of us. And we can only get honest when we start to be honest with ourselves and tell each other and tell our families and tell our communities the truth about our story. No longer allowing these celebrities to kind of fly in and say, we got to pull ourselves up by the bootstraps, and have random other celebrities and also politicians that have said, I'm not doing anything for Black folks. I'm just going to say that. Why would that person speak for your community that you're trying to help? We have to tell our stories and no longer allow other people to tell our stories. We need to own the narrative. The time is now. And I say this is extremely important because we have our younger generations are looking at us for guidance. And they should look to us for guidance and not celebrities, because celebrities are there to make a profit. Period. I know that's like hard. And like I said earlier when I started this, like when you are taking personal responsibility and you are being honest about your healing, you have to hear the good, the bad, the ugly. And yes, there are some celebrities that are donating money and supplies, like Rihanna. She's doing like she has donated so much, and we are so thankful for that. However, before COVID happened, there were disparities that exist. And whether you agree with it or not, African Americans were out here saying, listen, we need politicians to not just come to our churches every Sunday or when it's time that they're running for election, but we need them to bring policies or create policies that actually have an impact in our community. And I don't know where those celebrities were, but I kept seeing them pop up saying we need to vote. They're up on stage with candidate so-and-so. But they're not telling these politicians, well, listen, there's a wealth gap. Well, listen, this is a disparity. This is a community that's highly populated by African Americans. But for some reason, like there's no true economics going on there. There's no job opportunities. The schools are falling apart. The sewage system is horrible. The water is poison. So look and see who's being placed in front of you to tell you your story. We need to own our story. Faith and religion. Faith and religion has always played a role in our community, a very strong role. And there have been times where we have had nothing and churches became the schools, built hospitals, really laid the foundation for us to build community. And I don't know. I want us to think about this. I don't know if that's still happening. So just think about it. Look at it in your own community and look to see what the churches in your community are doing. And look to see when we're talking about race, is there a conversation about that and how is that being addressed? And when politicians come into your churches and you see the disparities, like literally you'll see a community that's heavily African American below the poverty line, and then you go like a few counties over and you have a predominantly white community, very affluent. You see us African Americans failing schools, broken water system, just living in horrible conditions. A few counties down, you'll see a more middle class, maybe solid middle class neighborhood. So when you have politicians that are coming to your church and promising that I'm going to do stuff or I'm going to bring this to your community, like, how does your church respond, and how do you position your church if you're a leader in your church, if you're a minister? How do you position your church to make sure that when that politician comes to speak to your congregation, that what they're telling you that they're going to do, that it will directly impact the people that they're speaking to? Right? So no longer should it be, well, candidate so and so came by and we showed him a good time and we sang this. Those days are over, right? Because now we need to be honest, especially with this COVID-19. It showed us where we really are as a society. It is showing us. And I think this is a few newsletters back where I said that I feel like 2020 is the year in which the veil's been lifted. And when I said that, I meant like we're seeing in our country, we're seeing the truth of our country, right? Looking at the health disparities, looking at the economic impact, look at how different communities are being treated. So while the veil's being lifted and we're looking at the truth of where and how we live as African Americans, we need to take a step back and say, okay, listen, what do I first need to do to make changes in my life? So that way my children know that how we are being treated is not okay. So let me do some work on myself. Let me start telling my story about what my mom and dad went through, what my grandparents went through. Let me start telling the story of my lineage. My children start asking questions. They start noticing that there's some elements of like race in society. There's this thing of race. They see that we're being treated differently. They start seeing stuff on television. Start to have that conversation if they're asking questions. And then if you're of a certain faith, a certain religious belief, then okay, as I do my work, I tell my story, then see if this is supported within your circle. Because faith is important and religion has its role as well. However, your healing, that's your process. And I say this with all due respect. You definitely have a faith in God. However, it still is important to begin to peel back the layers so you can begin to heal. Because pretending or saying that whatever you went through doesn't really impact you, but you've never dealt with it, it's going to keep popping up. It will continue to surface. So we have to do the work. There's no way of getting around that. So when you begin to do the work, you're telling your story and see how that plays out. Connect with people of like faith or of different religions and say, okay, we as a people, regardless of what our faith is, regardless of what our religion is, in this country, in America, there still is disparities. Regardless if we're Muslim, regardless if we're practicing Christianity, it doesn't matter. There still is a disparity that exists when it comes to being African American. So what do we do to fix that? Do we want to continue the same road that we're going down now with just kind of being okay with these random celebrities popping up and telling us that what we need to do, or these political commentators? Don't even get me started on Van Jones. But is that what we want? Or do we want to start saying, okay, I'm going to start being accountable for me. I'm going to start telling my story. And I want to connect with people in my faith and religious circles so that we can begin to create a community in which our children will be able to really thrive. Because that's what our ancestors wanted. Right? That's what they wanted. That's what they fought for. That's what they died for. That's what they were voting for a better life for their next generation. They weren't casting votes because because Obama endorsed Biden. Because Biden was Obama's running mate. They cast their vote because they said, listen, our communities are suffering, and I don't want my children to suffer how I am currently suffering. So I'm going to cast my vote for someone that is going to say, right? Who's going to say, listen, this is what we're going to do for your community. And unfortunately, which I'll get into this in the next episode, this goes into our organizations as well, such as the NAACP. Many of these organizations were created because of the African American experience and how we were not able to compete in society. So because of that, these organizations were built to help us. But are they still doing that? But we can only begin to have that conversation when we do our own internal work. So hopefully you see that there is an active role that we play in this. And yes, there is this element of you have to kind of like, quote unquote, save yourself. But that's more so about you doing your healing work. That's our responsibility. But as we do that, I guarantee you how you view society, how you view what's around the world around you, that will begin to change. And you'll want to tell your story, and you'll want to speak the truth, and you'll no longer want other people to speak for you. And you'll see how your faith and religion plays a role in all of that, which it does. So just take a moment, if you can today, think about what we went over. It may have been a little hard. I apologize. But I think it's a necessary truth that we must talk about. We must be honest in order for us to heal ourselves, stop this continual cycle of trauma, and really have an impact on our community. And we can do that together. I can't do it by myself. I need to continue working on me, that's going to take a lot of work. So I'll have to continue to work on me and also connect with other people that are also doing similar work. And that's what I am working to do with this podcast, is to create a platform where we can have those hard conversations so we can begin to heal. Because all those ancestors that came before us, some of them were doing the work, probably some of them wasn't, but the ones that were doing the work, that sacrifice, gave their last, they did that to ensure that the future generations will not experience what they experienced. And we have to keep that thought in our mind, even when we're voting, how we're carrying out our daily lives. Right? So think about that. Think about what we went over today. Drop me a comment. Let me know your thoughts. Let me know what you've been doing on your healing journey as we've kind of gone through the first, I think we're like on the 5th episode now. What have you been doing on your own healing journey to begin to heal from what you've experienced, maybe in childhood, maybe from a previous relationship? I would love to hear your thoughts. Healing is an ongoing process, right? As soon as you think, and I say this through experience, as soon as I thought like, oh man, okay, I'm good, I dealt with that, it'll kind of come up in a different way. And I realized like, ooh, I still got to work there. Still got to work on that. So it's continuous. So make sure you extend that grace to yourself. knowing that the work is continuous, but you also want to make sure that you're moving forward. Okay, so I hope you guys enjoyed today's episode. Please make sure you tune in next week for another episode as we start to wind up our whole series on Dr. Joy Degruy's work, Post-Traumatic Slave Syndrome. Thank you so much for joining me. If you are following me on maybe on Facebook or on Instagram, please make sure that you subscribe to the Healing Element Podcast and make sure you subscribe to the Healing Element Podcast YouTube channel. Please go to my website, kaimarie.com, to learn more about my services, and be sure to sign up to the Journey to Healing newsletter, where you will receive tips on how you can manage your stress. Yes, our inner world is so important, so I will provide you tips on how you can keep peace in the midst of a storm. How many of us can do that? I almost sound like a sermon, right? Okay, I'm gonna wrap it up now. But thank you guys so much for joining me. I appreciate it very much. And please spread the word. You know, I look forward to future conversations, but I can't do this without your support. Thank you so much. You guys have a great day.